Good afternoon, all. I, Indu Jain, Assistant Professor, IIMT College of Science and Technology. Today, our topic for live session is micro teaching. Now, first of all, we will discuss about micro teaching. What is micro teaching? Just the introduction for micro teaching. Micro teaching can be understood as an innovative method of training for pupil teachers or pre-service teachers to become potent teachers in real setting by practicing skills in artificial setting. Or we can say that what is micro teaching? Micro teaching is specialized training provided to trainee teachers or pupil teachers to gain specific teaching skills. Now, the topic for discussion is what are teaching skills? There are certain skills which are utilized during the teaching learning process, such as introductory skill or explanation skill, blackboard skill, means the skills which are utilized during the teaching, and a teacher can improve his or her teaching by using this skill successfully. Now, the historical background for this micro teaching is basically a scholar named Keith Action from the Stanford University discovered that videotape recorder could be used as feedback device for a demonstration lesson. Means Keith Action was first utilized the videotape to see his weaknesses during or strength during the teaching process or during the demonstration of the lesson. Next, the other students of the university also started using videotape recorder to modify the trainee teacher behaviors. Finally, White Allen in 1963 at Stanford University coined the term micro teaching. So, D. White Allen was the first to start this micro teaching program during the teachers training. In India, it was first introduced by D.D. Tiwari in the year 1967 at Government Central Pedagogical Institute, Allahabad. Now, we discuss it in detail. What is micro teaching? Basically, micro teaching is a teacher training technique for learning teaching skills. It employs a real teaching situation for developing skills and helps to get deeper knowledge regarding the art of teaching. Yes, teaching is the art as well as science too. So it is the need that during the teacher training program, there is a need to train the teachers or pupil teachers in different skills which are utilized during the teaching learning process. Micro teaching introduces the teacher trainee to a wide range of teaching skills and allows the teacher trainee to practice each skill one at a time until he or she becomes proficient in the skills. Means during the micro teaching program, one skill is utilized in one time as the term micro teaching. Micro means small, means all the complexities during the teaching is decreased to a small level. Later on, the teacher trainee will be able to link many such skills to achieve the desirable outcome. Means he or she become completely trained in different skills so that they can become the potent teachers. Micro teaching provides teachers with a practice setting. As we have already discussed, micro teaching is utilized both pre-service or in-service teachers. So micro teaching provides teachers with a practice setting, means it is a practice program in which the normal complexities of the classroom are reduced and in which the teacher gets feedback on performance. Feedback is another main aspect of the micro teaching. Trainee get complete feedback about their performance during the micro teaching. Micro teaching is a procedure in which a student teacher practices different teaching skills with a reduced number of pupils in a reduced period of time with emphasis on narrow and specific teaching skills. Means during micro teaching, the number of students are less as compared to the normal classroom, and the time period for teaching is also reduced. And in micro teaching, one skill is practiced during one cycle. There are certain definitions which are given by a certain educationist. First of all, according to D.W. Allen, micro teaching is a scaled down teaching encounter in class size and time. Means during micro teaching, the class size is reduced and time is also reduced so that the complexity of the normal classroom teaching is reduced. According to B.M. Shore, micro teaching is a real teaching range of activities. Means all the activities which are required during the normal teaching is practiced during micro teaching. According to Mack and Anwin, the term micro teaching is most often applied to the use of closed circuit television to give immediate feedback of a trainee teacher's performance in a simplified environment. According to Mack and Anwin, there is a closed circuit television is required in the micro teaching lab by which the trainee teachers or pupil teachers get immediate feedback about their performance during the demonstration. According to B.K. Pasi, micro teaching is a training technique. This is a technique to improve the trainee teachers, which requires student teachers to reach a single concept using specified teaching skills to a small number of pupils in a short duration of time. What is micro teaching? It is a training technique which requires a student teacher. Means the student teachers can get the complete utilization of the teaching activities by teaching a single concept, or we can say that the lesson is small, using a particular teaching skill to a small number of pupils, means number of students is less in the classroom and the time duration is also reduced. Now, there are different phases of micro teaching. First one is knowledge acquisition phase. Second one is skill acquisition phase. And third one is transfer phase. During the knowledge acquisition phase, the student teachers acquire the knowledge of various teaching skills for which he or she is to be trained. Means the trainer give complete knowledge of that particular skill to the pupil teachers, and then again the trainer demonstrate that particular skill in front of the pupil teachers. In second phase, that is the acquisition phase, the student teacher, after seeing the demonstration lesson, prepares a curriculum plan for micro teaching. Means pupil teacher prepare a small lesson plan for this micro teaching program, and then he or she practices that skill that attains proficiency in that skill, by which the pupil teacher attains the complete proficiency in that particular skill. What is transfer phase? In this phase, the student teacher transfers the skills learned through micro teaching to actual classroom situation and completes the teaching process. Or we can say that during this transfer phase, the pupil teacher utilized that particular skills learned during the micro teaching to the actual classroom situations, and by this the teaching process is completed. Now, the most important is the procedure of micro teaching. What is the procedure of micro teaching? Micro teaching procedure start with the skill definition. Means the skill is explained to the pupil teacher by the trainer or the teacher educator. Next, the teacher educator demonstrates the skill in front of the pupil teacher. Next, in the next stage, the pupil teacher prepare the lesson plan, and then he teaches that plan to the fellow members. Then feedback is provided by the fellow members and the teacher educator to the pupil teacher. If there is some weaknesses, then he replans the lesson and then again reteach, then provide feedback to the pupil teacher. If further needed, then he again do the same process until and unless he or she is completely skilled in that particular skill. Now, these are the different steps of micro teaching. As we have already discussed, skill definition, demonstration by the expert, preparing micro lesson plan, then teaching in a small group, discussion or feedback, replanning, reteaching, and re-evaluation or re-feedback. Now, the time period for every step is decided during the micro teaching plan. The total micro teaching cycle is of 36 minutes. Planning is before the micro teaching cycle starts. Means planning is done. We can say that first step is done before the micro teaching cycle. Second one is teaching. Teaching is of 6-minute duration. As we have already discussed, the time period for teaching is reduced to, here we can see that it is reduced to 6 minutes. Then feedback is provided to the pupil teacher or trainee teacher. It is again of 6 minutes. This feedback is given to the pupil teacher by their fellow members or fellow students and by the teacher educator itself. Then he replan. If there is certain weaknesses, then he replan the lesson, and again the time period for replanning is 12 minutes. Again, he reteach for 6 minutes, then provide feedback, or we can say that re-feedback again for 6 minutes. In this way, the total cycle, micro teaching cycle, is of 36 minutes. 6-minute teaching, then 6-minute feedback, total 12 minutes, then replanning again for 12 minutes, 12 and 12, 24, then reteach for 6 minutes, that is 30 minutes, and re-feedback again for 6 minutes, that is 36 minutes. So in this way, the total time for micro teaching cycle is 36 minutes. Now, there are certain teaching skills for which this micro teaching plan is going on. These teaching skills, as per Allen, are stimulus variation, set induction, closer, teacher silence and non-verbal cues, reinforcing pupil participation, fluency in questioning, probing questioning, use of higher questions, divergent questions, recognizing and attending behavior, illustrating and use of examples, lecturing, planned repetition, completeness of communication. These all are the skills which a teacher require during their teaching learning process. Further, teaching skill as per B.K. Passy. Passy again gave certain skills. First one is writing instructional objectives. It is very important. Introducing a lesson, fluency in questioning, probing questioning, explaining, illustrating with examples, stimulus variation, silence and non-verbal cues, reinforcement, increasing pupil participation using Blackboard, achieving closer, recognizing attending behavior. Further, teaching skill as per NCERT, National Council of Educational Research and Training, writing instructional objectives, organizing the content, creating set for introducing the lesson, structuring classroom questions, question delivery and its distribution, response management, means feedback, explaining, illustrating with examples, using teaching aids, stimulus variation, pacing of the lesson, promoting pupil participation, use of Blackboard, achieving closure of the lesson, giving assignments, evaluating the pupil's progress, diagnosing pupil learning difficulties and taking remedial measures, management of the class. There are 19 skills which are defined by the NCERT. But there are some core skills which are used to practice during the micro-teaching cycle. First one is a skill of introducing a lesson. It is very important to introduce a lesson before actually start the lesson during the normal classroom situation. During this introduction, the pupil teacher can introduce with the help of certain questions, asking certain questions, or by a short story. There are different methods to introduce a particular lesson for a particular subject. It depends on the subject how a lesson is introduced before the students. The second one is a skill of using Blackboard. Blackboard is very important for a teacher. How is Blackboard utilized or used during the teaching learning process? It is very important how to write on the board, the size of the letters on the board, straight lines, standing position of the teacher during the utilization of the Blackboard. All are included in the Blackboard skill. Next one is a skill of questioning. Questioning for a teacher is very important. By asking certain question, teacher can interact with the student successfully. Framing of the question and delivering of the questions both are important, and pupil teacher can train during this micro teaching cycle in delivering or in framing the questions. Fourth one is skill of reinforcement. Again, it is very important. There are two types of reinforcement, negative reinforcement and positive reinforcement. Now, the pupil teacher has to decide which reinforcement, negative or positive, is utilized during the delivering of the lesson, or we can say that during the classroom environment. By reinforcing, teacher can motivate his or her students successfully. So this skill is again very important for a teacher. Next one is skill of stimulus variation. Again, it is very important. Stimulus variation means changing in the speech pattern, changing in the head or body movement, hand and body movement. Again, this stimulus variation is important to motivate, to concentrate the students' activities. Next one is skill of explaining. Explanation is very important for a teacher. During explanation, certain audiovisual aids are used. So that skill is also included in this explaining skill. Different words are such that the linking words are utilized during the explanation skill. Pupil teacher can become skilled in explanation with the help of this micro teaching cycle. The skill of probing questions. This skill is also very important, that is utilized to understand or to know about the deep knowledge of the students. Next one is a skill of illustrating with example. There are certain illustrations or certain stories or certain examples from daily life can be utilized to make lesson interesting. Again, this is a create interest and motivation in the students is the basic for making classroom active during the teaching learning process. Now, what is the nature of micro teaching? Micro teaching is the process of establishing a mutual relationship between the teacher and his or her students. Of course, relationship is must between the teacher and the students to make the active classroom teaching. Micro teaching is the process of bringing change in the behavior of the students. Here we can say that these students are pupil teachers. Learning is done during micro teaching cycle or micro teaching process with the help of micro teaching process. And the behavior of the pupil teacher is drastically changed with the help of this micro teaching program. During the teacher training program, micro teaching is the first step to train the teacher in different teaching skills. So the behavior of students can be easily changed due to this micro teaching program. Micro teaching is a purpose fulfilling process. Yes, of course, it is a purposeful process. But due to this micro teaching, the teacher training, or we can say that pupil teachers become skilled for the teaching process. Micro learning is a developmental process. Teachers are developed, as I already said, that the micro teaching is the first step during the training program for the teachers. So the teachers are completely developed, or they can become potent teachers with the help of this micro learning or micro teaching. Micro learning is a formal and informal process. When pupil teachers teach their friends or their fellow members, then this is informal process. And when this teaching is applied to a normal classroom, then this is a formal process. Now, what are the different advantages of micro teaching? Micro teaching is very advantageous during the teacher training program. It reduces normal classroom teaching by scale down teaching. As we have already discussed, all the whether students, number of students or skill or content, all are reduced to a small level. The training of the teachers become individualized. Individual training is provided by this micro teaching cycle. Each trainee makes progress undeveloped teaching skills at his own rate depending on this ability. As we already saw that the reteaching, re-feedback, again reteach, re-reteach, re-feedback is provided to the trainee teachers. So teacher can become trained in a particular skill at his or her own rate. It focuses attention on teaching behavior to modify and improve in the desired direction. Here the direction that they can become the potent teachers, and micro teaching, of course, modify the behavior of the teachers or pupil teachers to become them a potent teacher. It is useful for developing teaching efficiency in pre-service and in-service teacher education programs. It is also very effective feedback device for the modification of teacher behavior. During feedback, pupil teacher get feedback through their teacher, through their fellow members, or through their own recording, video recording, by which they get complete feedback and can improve herself or himself. It is a training device for improving teaching practice and prepare effective teacher or better teachers. Again, the knowledge and practice of the teaching skills can be given by the use of this micro teaching, and the specific teaching skills are developed by the micro teaching experiences. Certain skills are reinforcement skill, probing question skill, explanation skill, and so on. There are certain disadvantages too of this micro teaching program. It fails in providing necessary training to teachers to teach in a normal classroom. Means the pupil teacher are trained due to this micro teaching cycle to teach a small group. Means we can say that the complexities which he or she has to face in the normal classroom is not provided during this micro teaching program. A limited number of students fails to arouse interest in teaching of different subjects. As a number of students is less during micro teaching cycle, so there is a little interest during the teaching learning process. It is only of a limited application. It requires more time for planning. Means it is time consuming, as a one pupil teacher can take 36 plus 36 plus 36, so many time to become proficient in that particular skill. So it is time consuming process. Sometimes it becomes difficult for the teachers to divide a bigger unit into a smaller unit. In a micro teaching class, the number of students is 5 to 10. There's very big class in the colleges, like 100, 200. So it is very difficult to group them into small units of 5 to 10 members. Many times it creates administrative difficulties. Sometimes the fellow members provide problems of discipline during the teaching process or during this micro teaching cycles. It hampers the classroom climate as the age of the fellow members is same. So the normal classroom situation is cannot provided during this micro teaching program. It is an artificial situation. Real situation is somewhat different from this artificial situation. So the teacher cannot become completely proficient for this real life situation with the help of this micro teaching cycle. It requires a supervisor to be more critical, to be more insightful. Means the supervisor or teacher educators are completely efficient to provide the complete feedback, to demonstrate the micro teaching skill in front of the teachers, pupil teachers. So we can conclude that micro teaching works as a focused instrument which has to practice essential teaching skills safely and effectively at any age. Besides certain disadvantages, micro teaching is a very good program, or it is a very good instrument by which teaching skills can be provided to the pupil teachers effectively. What is learning? Learning is a change in behavior which is brought about by activity, by training, or by experiencing at any age, and micro teaching is provided all these things: activity, training, and experiencing. When the learner is more experienced, learning becomes more effective. And during the teaching learning process, the pupil teacher become experienced, and so he or she can become a potent teacher or effective teacher. The most important quality of the participants of the micro teaching session is the ability to give and receive constructive feedback. It is very important that during micro teaching cycle, feedback is provided to the learners after every step with an open mind and achieves appropriate teaching learning goals. In addition, it increases self-confidence of the teachers in friendly atmosphere. So we can see that the micro teaching is very important to develop different skills which are utilized during the teaching learning process. So it is a very good technique during the teacher training program. Thank you.